Hello. What a gift to be here in Western Massachusetts. This is my first time in Western Massachusetts. And I have to say, to George, who you showed gratitude to, he is my CFO. So thank you to Westfield State University for an amazing CFO. And also to you, President Thompson, the most distinguished president of this university that I know. So you're one and only one that I actually know. I feel so honored to be joining you, so thank you for the invitation.
Oh, sure, I'm so happy. And when I had my conversation with you, trying to encourage you to come here, I was just so impressed with your fun-loving personality, I'll say, and also your wonderful accomplishments. An engineer from Stanford.
100%.
A former mayor.
100%.
And someone who really believes in the power of the voice. So I just really want to ask you, when did you first realize that your voice mattered, and how did you learn to use it with such confidence?
Such a good question. This conjures for me a high school experience. So how many college students do we actually have in the room? Okay, I see some hands. All right, when I was in high school, which was, you know, as my kids say, in the 1900s, I remember being the campaign manager for a bunch of classmates. My freshman year, my sophomore year, my junior year. Someone in my class always asked me to be the campaign manager for them as they ran their campaign for class president. And I always said yes. I did the organizing. I made sure that the campaign was well done. And then I always had to do the introductory remarks right before the candidate would make their speech. By the time I got to my junior year, I'll never forget it. My teacher, her name was Miss Johnson-Skabinski. I had to send her a message one day thanking her, but she pulled me aside and she said, "Regina, do you realize that your voice is the voice that the students are actually voting for?" And it hadn't occurred to me, right? I had always been so honored that I was being asked to organize a campaign for someone else. She said to me, "Why are you always the campaign manager and never the candidate?" And that actually was not the moment that made me realize that I had voice. I was just a junior in high school doing my level best to be an amazing student. But it was the moment that I got some clarity about what was special and important about me. And it wasn't until later where I was a chief of staff. I remember I was the chief of staff to the president of a company that I was working for. And once again, I was organizing everything for him. And in fact, I used to say, I work so hard, I make him think that he's actually good at his job. And at some point, I woke up and I said, I'm ready to run my own mission. It's no longer time for me to be someone else's number two. It's time for me to take a mission and run with it. So as you know, I'm multidisciplinary. I'm an engineer and also a public policy scholar. And that's sort of what makes me a technology executive and a mayor at the same time. I was really trying to bring meaning to both of these disciplines at the same time and in different ways. And it wasn't until I came to this role that I'm in now where I finally got to merge these two things together. So even though it's the hardest job that I've ever done, it in some ways is more efficient than doing two jobs in two different places. And it really allows me to focus on moving and organizing and keeping grassroots engaged in democracy, and also bringing forward technology solutions which very well leverage my engineering background.
Sure. You know, I one time thought I could be an engineer.
I believe it.
You know, someone foolishly said to me when I was in 11th grade in high school, they said, Linda, my chemistry teacher said, you should become an engineer. And I said, well, what does that mean? Does it mean I need to take calculus?
Yes.
Yes. And I said, well, maybe I should think of something else as an option for myself. But yeah, those are those moments when someone sees you and finds something in you that you didn't even see in yourself are so critical for long-term success. So I just want to ask you, what leadership skills should students focus on while they're developing before they graduate, so that they can really kind of identify that internal person within them and bring out some of their gifts?
Yeah. There's probably 1,000 things on this list, but I want to boil them down to a couple that I think have been most important for me. One, and I alluded to it earlier, is the idea that we should always be learning. I said that I was multidisciplinary, and part of that was that when I finished with engineering, I was like, this is really good, and this is not all completely me. I need something else to round it out. And I was telling a story in the back about my husband. I married a computer scientist, and I remember back in the 1900s when we were both studying at the same time, that I gave myself so much credit for being the one who could actually make things. And he was like in a lab doing virtual fake things, but I was doing real things. Like, I've got this real digital piano at the end of this, at the end of this class. What do you have? And as we were graduating, and he's a little bit older than me, but as we were graduating, the market was really changing. We were moving integrated circuits overseas, which was my core discipline. And we were shepherding in the consumer internet in the 1900s. And so now he jokes with me all the time, like, who really made the good choice back in our college days. But immediately upon graduation, I had to learn that, because that's where the market was. And then I added policy in because that's where I had interest. And it just turns out that when we allow ourselves to be ourselves, not be fashioned in someone else's image, right? Because we all have to live our unique journeys, that opportunities present themselves that allow us to actualize all those things that make us us. So I would say being interdisciplinary is actually really important. The second thing I would offer is that we have to develop the gift of judgment. And when I say judgment, I don't mean knowledge. One of the things that my children do, and perhaps some of you do better than anyone else, is learn things really fast. Information is infinitely accessible to us today in a way that it was not in the 19 or the 18 or the 1700s. And so we give ourselves the belief, or we cultivate the belief that because we know things, that we have good judgment about how to do things and get them done. And it's actually the judgment that matters. The knowing is important, but the judgment about how to deploy what you know, when the right time is to deploy that thing, is actually more important than knowing the thing. So I would say that's probably number 2 on my list. And one of the things that makes me a better executive today than perhaps I was in my 30s, when I thought I was the best executive and really wasn't. So that would be the second thing. The third thing I probably would offer is how to read a room and understand what it is that is in the room that's surrounding you. And this is something that gets really, really tuned over time, and largely when you drop yourself into lots of different kinds of rooms. What are the things that people seem to be afraid of, but they won't say? What are the stories that get told and why do they get told in those ways, in those moments? What are the subtle signs of energy that you can pick up? And by the way, it's not to be afraid of any of those things. Obviously, when any one of us walks into any room, whether it's a familiar room or an unfamiliar room, there's going to be all kinds of signals that we can pick up. But I know that when I was younger, I used to always believe that if I walk in the room knowing all the things, that was the thing that was going to distinguish me the most from everyone else. And actually the art of really listening and taking in the signal from everyone around me has been way more important in my latter years. Now, I still am learning how to listen and read rooms. This is not something that you go from 0 to 1, as we say in engineering. And my team would say I still talk more than I listen. They would. But getting that skill refined is incredibly important at the leadership level.
Sure. Learning how to read the room, learning how to listen carefully to what people are thinking so that you can then pivot sometimes in order to know the appropriate things to do. You know, one of the things that I learned a long time ago is that sometimes when you're a leader, it doesn't always come with a title.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and people have said that to me. They say, you know, just because they call you a director doesn't mean that you really are doing that work. But what are some of the ways that you would advise a person today or a young person today who, what are the things that they need to learn how to do so that they can learn how to lead later on? What can they do as a student or any of the jobs that they're doing right now that can help them to learn those skills, whether it's in their community or it's in their church or if it's in any place? What would you suggest that people need to learn how to do?
Good question. Hopefully I use some examples that are really accessible to everyone, because before I was a leader, I had lots of leadership roles. Let me give you a few examples. I was the director of the choir. And you look at that role and you say, that's not leading anything, but it absolutely was. We had hundreds of members. We had sopranos, altos, tenors, and a couple of other in-betweens. And it was my job to bring out the harmony of those voices, to make sure that no one was too loud or too soft, and to ensure that together they gave the most melodic tunes that the audience could possibly receive. That was one of my early experiences of leadership that I don't know that I necessarily, I definitely think of it now as a position of leadership. At the time, I was just making music. So harmony and how to make harmony of lots of different things is important. It's been important to me. It is important to me now. I was also a dance captain. And again, at the time, of course, you're the captain. The use of the word captain implies some sort of leadership, but we were dancing. And now I recall just how much effort we applied to the use of showmanship, right? It's not just that you know how to dance, but that you're out there dancing in a way that shows the world your level of excitement, your level of precision, your level of capability, that the show is not the show unless you have great showmanship. This is not to say that leaders should be all show. But if you've ever listened to someone who is very knowledgeable but incredibly boring, very capable but can't manage to get a group engaged, you recognize that there's a part of how we show up that really affects how the rest of the room responds to us and moves forward. I was also a leader in my engineering society. Can you imagine that? So I was one of very few women of color And I remember there was only one other black woman in my class in the School of Electrical Engineering at Stanford. We became so close that she was my bridesmaid in my wedding. But if you can imagine leading an engineering society where it's mostly males, where the predominant sort of way of being is deeply reserved, dare I say nerdy. There were a few pocket protectors that showed up in the 1900s. And I remember just not feeling the same as my colleagues. And there I was leading this engineering society. That's where I really learned the art of bringing out the best in difference, right? It wasn't my time to become like them. It was my time to show us how together our ways of being could make an even greater engineering society. And I did that from my sophomore year to my senior year in college. All of those to say that what seems central in it is that I was gravitating towards the things that I love and liked to do, and finding the path to being my authentic self in that. And that each one of those experiences gave me something that I use today at 52 in the work that I do, and even as a former mayor. So I really encourage all of us to sort of lean into what we love, to find the opportunities where we would naturally gravitate towards doing something, and to find what's missing and lead through that. Because no matter what it is, it's going to give you something that you need to fashion and form you into a better leader in your future.
You know, your combination of being a mayor and an engineer is always fascinating to me.
Yeah, you're fascinated to my constituents too.
You know, I always had this idea of what an engineer is. You know, you're very focused on an experiment or that science, where I always think of a mayor as being someone who has to be outgoing and meeting everyone. Was there ever a moment when you've had self-doubt where, can I do this? And then when you have that self-doubt, how do you move through that moment of feeling, well, is this me, or did I make the right decision? Could you share some of that moment when you may have had a little bit of self-doubt?
100%. And just to acknowledge the lead-in that you offered me, it's one of the things that is most delightful about me, I think. I have this outgoing personality that surprises people, but George will tell you that when it's time to fixate on the data, the experiments, the numbers, the facts, I am relentless, like relentless. So it's kind of a gift, and then they don't see the other part of me coming, which is kind of nice. The thing that I would offer there is that even at 52, even as CEO and president of ActBlue, I still, even now, deal with moments of doubt. So it's not, for me, something that just goes away once you become a CEO. Certainly that doesn't come when you turn a magical age or do something important. We always say at ActBlue, courage, which leadership takes a lot of, is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of fear, of doubt, and the will to move forward anyway. So for me, I will say that I think of signal to noise. Does anyone understand signal to noise? Any engineers in the house? Okay. In engineering, we think about this idea that there is something that is real that is coming through. It's a true signal, right? You need to know more information. You don't exactly know, you haven't done this quite right. You need to make a correction. That's real signal. And when that signal comes through, my job is to respond to that real signal by gathering more information, learning more, becoming smarter, making my signal diminish because I have offset what I've really learned. There's also noise. Noise is, I don't belong in this room. I'm not credible. I don't have things that are important to say that anyone cares about. Those things can be deeply distracting, but they're also not real. So, as fear comes through, or as self-doubt comes through, I spend a minute of time asking myself, is this real signal, or is it noise? If it's real signal, I'm going to go get the things that help me diminish the signal. And if it's noise, I'm going to reflect on this. Regina, you have done hard things before. Here's the examples of the hard things that you've done. Here's all the reasons why these people have an opportunity to learn something from you, and you have something to share if the conditions can be met in this moment, and you can step forward with your authentic voice and clarity to share it. So get rid of this noise and get out there and do it. That's the conversation that I continue to have with myself all the time. Sometimes I hear those who were born in the 2000s talking about imposter syndrome. We didn't name it that when I was coming up in the 1900s, but I can certainly identify with what the sentiment is. That would be the rough equivalent of noise. Mm-hmm. The journey of all of us is to get rid of that and to focus on what's real, to learn more about how we can attenuate that signal, and to move forward with all the strength and conviction that we've got.
Sure. I'm sure right now, being the CEO of ActBlue, you have some pretty challenging leadership moments. Uh-huh. I read the letter that you got from someone in Congress.
Oh, yeah.
And
Congressman Style. He's a dear heart.
You know, if I would have gotten that letter, I would have had, like a skipped heartbeat. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell us how you kind of move through those moments of challenging of your leadership, and what lessons did you learn from that?
So for those who have not kept up with what's going on with ActBlue, and I won't deal too much with the political moment, but only to say, yes, indeed, we did get a letter of interest, and by letter, what she means is subpoena, so I'll call it a subpoena, from Congress. We also got an executive memorandum from the President of the United States, both of them wanting to look into the activities of ActBlue with the implied or the narrative assumption that we were committing fraud inside of this thing. Now, y'all please know, I am the straightest shooter out there. If there was any fraud happening anywhere, I would be running from it, not the CEO of it. But that's besides the point. The real point is that when your government institutions are facing you with a moment like this, I think the question is, how do you engage it? So I would be lying, absolutely lying, if I did not admit that my first feeling was fear. First feeling. Not because of guilt, but because it was sort of like, oh, well, if this is exercised to the nth degree and I have no recourse or ability to stop it, how will this affect me? How will it affect the organization? How will it affect my family, my husband, my children? I mean, there were just a lot of things that were going through my mind that were deeply, deeply distracting. Not noise, though, signal, right? The signal was you were afraid because you do not know how far this can go, and you do not know just how interesting this storyline is going to become. Those of you who are CEOs in the room know that CEOs have fiduciary responsibilities to the institution that they are leading, and the obligation that we take on as the senior-most human for an organization is to make sure that it survives through moments like that. And I have to say that after I had my meltdown, and my husband is like, "Dear, everything is going to be okay. You're going to get through this." After I survived that entire meltdown, the next question was, okay, what do we have to do to manage and move through this? What resources do we need to bring to bear to strengthen our position and strengthen our footing? In what ways can we deal with the people, right? Because if I'm afraid, imagine how an employee who's working for the organization is feeling, what they have to say to their parents who are asking, what is this organization that you're working for again? Imagine all of that just needs to be managed to ensure that everyone stays productive. My answer was to keep a steady hand. And that is hard to do when your first feeling is fear, your first feeling. How do you keep a steady hand through this and make sure that we keep moving forward in exactly the ways that we always have as the grassroots enabling democratic institution that we are? And I feel very proud to say that almost 2 years in, and that's a lot of interest, 2 years of interest is a lot of interest, we are moving through a magnanimous transformation. We're building more technology products than we've ever built in the history of the organization. We're going through AI transformation in a way that is appropriate for this moment, but if fear is leading you, you don't quite get there because you're so focused on protecting yourself from the fear. We're fanning out and spanning out in really incredible and lively ways, and also being attentive to this interest. So the thing that I say of all of our leaders is that we're practicing peacetime leadership and wartime leadership at the same time. And for any leader in the room, you sort of know that wartime leadership is the protect, defend, right? It's sort of the leadership that you would find really coming forward in a war. Imagine that we find ourselves in a war in this moment, right? But that's the kind of skills and tactics that you're bringing forward there. And peacetime leadership is more lively, growth-enabled, right? You're thinking about what your possibilities are between now and the future. And most leaders at any given time get an opportunity to really exercise one or the other. But practicing both at the same time is a skill. It is an art. And it is something that we have had to do together, recognizing that we had a transformation and also were under attack. So the way that I managed it was to say, we cannot be one or the other. This is not a Boolean thing, right? We must be peacetime and wartime at the same time. And what I say of the executive leaders and of the team that we had, this was new language for them, but they picked it up. And I'm really proud of the way that we're moving through our transformation while also being respectful to all of our interested parties, offering responsiveness to everything that they're looking for, and doing it in a way that makes us feel proud of who we are and what we've built as an organization.
Higher education is going through a need for transformation at this point in time as well because of the rhetoric around why is it important for people? Why is it important for people to go to college anymore? Why I can do just as well if I don't? And so there's this whole concern about that on one hand. And then the large number of higher education institutions that we have, especially here in Massachusetts, where the demand is not the same as it was in the past. The number of people who are able to go to college is not the same. So as a senior leader, how do we coach and mentor all of the other people that are working with us or around us to get them to start thinking about this methodology of transformation that you're describing? You know, what are what's the toolkit that needs to be put in place to develop all of the other people so that they are just as proficient in learning how to pivot or use transformation as a strategy?
Ooh, I'm so glad that you asked me that question. My team often calls me CEO, Chief Education Officer, not Executive Officer. And the other name that they've given me is Professor Wallace-Jones, which means nothing in the context of these hollowed halls, but means everything at ActBlue. First of all, I want to posit that every leader has a responsibility to develop, to mentor, and to take interest in those who are coming up through the ranks. And to do it in a way that is generous and that offers a path for people to learn what you know. So in politics, which I did not come up through the political ranks in the way that many of our full-time and lifetime politicians did, but there's this idea that you gate or block information. You gate or block others from being part of what you know because somehow gating or blocking makes you special and keeps the competition out. I actually don't believe in that. It's kind of the rough equivalent of a zero-sum game. I believe that when we make us smarter, we're able to do things together that are even more incredible. So you're going to laugh with me, but I actually led a session on how to create a good go-to-market plan. In politics or in political spaces, there's no such thing as a go-to-market plan. If you come from the private sector, you know that go-to-market plans are the plans that you develop to move product through the marketplace. And because I am merging these two worlds together, there's lots of skill sets and capabilities that are not present in this space that are standard fare in the private sector. And so I did this with a lot of generosity. Here I was having this session with a couple of leaders, really naming what does a channel look like, what is the expense of that channel, how do we move product effectively through that channel. And when we left that meeting, I remember one of my leaders saying to me, "This is the best session that I have had on this topic in my entire career." And I walked away from that session feeling like, oh, like you've done your part, right? For me, taking an interest in people and really understanding where they're shining and pouring into the places where they're not is our duty. And I look to every leader to do that. Some people do it better than others. But for those who are looking for that kind of support, gravitate towards the leaders that are like that, not the leaders that are saying, just follow me and be like me. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately the journey is for you to be the unique and special you, not to be like me. And I can help you expand your capabilities to be the best you that you can possibly be. But it's not in service to being like me, it's in service to you being the very best you that you can possibly be. Look for those leaders. Mm-hmm. Those are the leaders that you should be seeking mentorship from, engaging with, and really making your career more lively and more lovely.
You know, trying to find a person who you can talk to, or a person who you can look up to as a person who can coach or mentor you, that's a skill. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I just would love for you to share is, what are some of the the personality characteristics that a person needs to look for in order for them to be able to build a relationship, because I think the most important thing in getting close to a person to help, so that they can help guide you through a way to begin to find who your authentic self is being able to develop those relationships. What advice would you give to the people here? Not just students, but we have mid-level leaders here.
Oh, great.
We have people here who are trying to figure out the next phase of a journey that they want to take. And I always say a leadership journey is not linear.
Yeah.
That journey goes up, down, sometimes sideways. So what would you suggest or advise a person to do if they're trying to be able to move ahead and seek their own leadership journey?
A good question. Let me answer this question first by telling a funny story, and I hope it's funny. I experienced it as funny when it happened. When I was about 38, which, gosh, that's almost 15 years ago, I remember sitting down with a junior staffer for lunch. She was so excited to have lunch with me, and I was so excited to have lunch with her. And we started this lunch, and she said, "Hey, I want you to be my mentor." And I was like, "What does that mean?" And she said, "Well, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and I can see that you've got 5,000 connections. And I was hoping that you would download these connections and share them with me so that I could have these 5,000 connections as well. And I'll go through them, and I'll figure out which ones are the best connections to help me facilitate where I want to go, and that will be the mentor contribution that you make to me." How do you think I felt at the end of that lunch? I was laughing so loudly in my spirit, not to her. Well, I could not believe it was such a inauthentic way to seek support in her career. And she was none the wiser that it was not the best way to get the support that she needed. So laugh a little bit at that story, and then hear my authentic truth. My authentic truth is that I have never actually sought mentors. I just haven't. I have been the kind of human that was always just focused on what it is that I want to contribute, how much more do I need to learn, where do I need to be to get those skills, how do I display that I've got those skills. I've been just very focused on the mission. And it turns out that in focusing on the mission, that there are people that have been watching me, taking an interest in me, noticing something that was different about what I was doing, and who reached out to say, "You could do this better or differently. You were really amazing here. I have never seen that before. I wonder if we drop you into this other setting over here, would this thing that I saw there grow in a different way?" Those are the people who have been mentors to me, not because I actively sat down with someone and said, "I want to be just like you. Tell me how you did it so I can do that." It was me exercising the art of being me authentically, and allowing those who took interest in that to be a part of that. Now, that has worked for me. It may work for many others in the room to go seek the person that you want to be and to have a conversation. I'm not saying don't do that. I am only saying there's room for this other alternative that has worked really well for me. But I want to differentiate that between what I think of and have found in my journey to be a credible difference from mentorship, and that is what I think of and what many professional executives would call sponsorship. The people who don't just want to place you here or there, but who are willing to put their personal reputations on the line, their personal credibility on the line, their personal endorsement of you on the line to move you to a place that you have not been before. I'll give you an example. When I became the CEO of ActBlue, I was not the likely choice. This is the largest engine inside of the democratic ecosystem, period. And if you think about the likely candidates to lead this, these would be people that either the nation has known already, and so them sitting in this seat is sort of par for the course, or someone who has come through the classic political rank. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting down with the former head of the DNC, and she looked at me and said, "I've never met anyone like you before." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Not that I come a dime a dozen, I don't, but I certainly felt like there were many very capable technology executives who had an interest in shaping democracy. She said, "No, we meet people a dime a dozen who sell a bunch of stories about what they know, but don't actually concretely articulate them in the ways that you do. When I'm talking to you, I know that you know what you're talking about." And so she said, "I'm willing to endorse you in this role." She wasn't a voter, right? Because the board is the voter of who the person is that's going to oversee this organization. "But I will sponsor you in this ecosystem that doesn't know you." There you are coming out of Silicon Valley. Here we are in Washington, D.C. Like, we deal on relationships, and no one has a relationship with you. That sponsorship has proven remarkable because she is the kind of woman that everyone knows, when I say it, it is so. I trust her. And if she trusts this leader, I should trust her too. And that at least gives me an opportunity to show what I've got. And I can win it or I could lose it. But she put her reputation on the line 4 years ago to give me the chance to win it. And that, for me, is the sign of a sponsor, someone who's willing to give up something in order for you to find success. And I have many of those that I can name from my career.
That's a wonderful just testament to your skill and that journey that you've taken. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of women out here who have aspirations to be able to be in a space like you are in, or to be able to meet someone who will sponsor them. One of the things that I experienced when I was a provost, wanting to move up to become a university president, was this conversation I had with the man who was that I reported to, and he made this comment to me. He says, "You know, people like you are taking over all of our jobs." Oh, yeah. And I said, "What?" People like you. You know, he was really very concerned about so many women being able to move into leadership roles and overlooking the men, and that we needed to be a little bit more patient in our attempt to move up in leadership. So this idea that as a female you need to wait. Yeah. What advice would you say to the women out here when someone says to you, "You need to wait your turn"? How did you learn to develop your patience and then say, "I'm ready and my turn is here now"?
Look, let me split this into two parts because, well, let me start by telling a story because I'm a storyteller. At the top, I will say the woman that is Regina Wallace-Jones for so much of her career was actually not feverishly driving towards the top seat. I was feverishly driving towards making the top seat be the very best. So what I offered earlier about until I woke up and said, wait a minute, I've got my own mission. I've got my own thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Good luck continuing to look good, doing what you're doing, but I'm going to kind of go off and run my own mission. So that's my DNA. That said, when I think about the you have to wait line, which undoubtedly there are men in the room who have heard that or been served that same thing, I would say two things. The first is, for a portion of this feedback, it is self-serving. It helps me that you wait because as long as you wait, I can continue to do what I'm doing. And we can look at any number of political leaders, for example, who have just been in their seats too long and they continue to say to others that want to move into their seats, wait your turn. That's a self-serving wait. And in those cases, if I go back to the signal to noise, that is noise. So in those cases, if you can parse out that your interest is a self-interest, it's not about me, it's about you, that's when you should drive towards the aspiration. But there's this other category of waiting that I actually think is right. What I think of it, what I name it is strategic patience. That category of waiting means I need a little bit more time to develop my judgment. I need a little bit more time to build out the broader set of experiences that I need to really be effective. Here I will say that when I was 30, I remember when I turned 30, I became a director for the first time. I had moved to six-figure earning for the first time. I thought I was so incredibly special, and I wasn't. I mean, listen, everybody is special in their own way, but I was probably not the most profoundly empathetic leader. I was often focused on getting there without thinking about how we were getting there. And I would say in a lot of ways, maybe I was an up-and-comer, but there was a lot more that I had to learn. I literally, when I became a senior executive, went back to everyone who reported to me in my 20s and 30s and apologized to them for who I was then and thanked them for continuing to be in relationship with me. That's a moment of self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And also, the things that I picked up between my 30s and my 50s, and by the way, we're all still evolving and growing, so I'm not there, I'm still growing. But the things that I have learned now are, gosh, when we hit a moment of breakdown, and when you're charging hard after things, for sure, you're gonna hit moments of breakdown. How do you recover from that in a heart-healthy way that lets your team of individuals know that there's still trust, there's still belief, there's still relationship, and also we had a hard moment, let's address the hard moment and look forward to how we get better together. That I do today better than I did in my 30s. Mm-hmm. That I can look at something that a team member is presenting me that they want to get out there and make it something that everybody knows quickly, and I am like, this is something that we need to move slow on because it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, or it's going to create some angst or unlock an energy that we don't want unlocked quite in that way. That instinct to slow down, even if we all have an intention to get something done, is something that I learned between my 30s and 52 that I didn't have in my 30s as a leader. The collection and endless stories that are in this pile is what I think of as strategic patience. No one should have made me the CEO and president of ActBlue when I was 32. It would have been a painful mess. And also, you can tell across all industries when that kind of decision was made when we should have been exercising strategic patience. Mm-hmm. That's where I really ask myself, what is it that I have to learn? How is it that I need to grow? Where do I need to expand to really show up in this role and give it the honor and the dignity that it deserves with me in it? And that I'm open to.
Sure. You know, what advice would you give to a person who feels like they're unseen or unheard?
Oh. Unseen or unheard. Look, I think there's two ways to think about that. Mm-hmm. Way number one is I should be heard because I have something to say or offer or contribute, and the room is so loud that I can't get my message out, right? And I would actually be worried about that scenario, because when we have something that would make us smarter and we don't allow that voice to be heard, there's a problem with the room. Case in point, does anyone have an executive assistant? Okay, I see some hands coming up. Mm-hmm. It turns out that all teams are better when you let the executive assistant speak.
That's
all
true.
Teams. That's just the reality. And scarcely few executives actually let the executive assistant speak, right? It's sort of your job is to manage my calendar or do my receipts or to do whatever. And when we are in strategic dialogue about important things, your job is to listen and to anticipate when others need something, not to actually contribute. I let my executive assistant speak. And in fact, I remember George pulling me aside at some point and saying, Regina, what in the heck are you doing here? And it was just important to me because I knew from my strategic patience that that voice was going to make us better. It might need to be refined. It might need to be translated. There might need to be some work that happens to make it truly accessible for the room. But silence was not the answer. And for me, my response to that was to quiet the room so she could speak. The other is, and by the way, the leader's responsibility is to do that if you find that to be true. And if you happen to be that voice that is not getting heard, finding the leader that can help you get that voice heard is your journey as well. But then there's also I want to say something. The thing that I want to say is not meaningful, but we're in a moment where everyone is just speaking, whether it's meaningful or not. For that category of speaking, and I'm sorry for the social influencers in the room, maybe a little bit mutation on that, muting of that is okay. That's a joke. But this other one is the one that we should really focus on. When we've got something meaningful to say, how do we make the conditions right? And for the leaders in the room, knowing that you have a part in that is really important.
Sure. Well, it would be very difficult for me to not let Michelle speak, who's my assistant. I'll just say that. She's, if you were going to just leave one message today to the people here, what would that be?
You know, not too long ago, I got an award called the Silicon Valley Legends Award. And when I accepted that award, I went to the stage and they were very disciplined and diligent about giving me exactly 2 minutes to say what I needed to say about myself because it was produced and they needed the program to move. But I said in my 2 minutes that there was a time when people would ask me, are you an engineer? Are you a public servant? Are you an organizer, or are you a mom? Are you a this, or are you a that? And I would actually entertain the question. Today, I don't entertain the question. I say yes. And that is because I believe that in these 52 years on earth, I have leaned into all of those dimensions of me that make me me. So if I'm showing up as an organizer, I'm an organizer. If I'm showing up as the mayor, I'm the mayor. If I'm showing up as an engineer, let's make something. And all of these identities are actually really important. In fact, the happiest people are the people that have these multifaceted lives. And the reason why they're happiest is because when any one cylinder fails, they have other cylinders that they can call on where they feel alive and joyful and that they can contribute. And that actually is one of the key ingredients to happiness in life. So the key thing I want everyone to walk out of the room with, no matter if you are in your early stages, in your middle stages, or if you are running an organization today, is let all of those pieces be. Honor all of them, because the things that make you you uniquely are the reason why you are here. And if you mute any one of them, you don't actually bring the world around you the thing that only you can give it. So that's what I would offer. Thank you so much.